I'm Tracy Osborne, and you're listening to the Daring Woman podcast. Imagine the story of a generation being altered by women who were empowered to live their truth and in turn can empower others to live theirs. It's time to rewrite the narrative. You know, one of the things that we talk about a lot on the podcast and in the magazine, the website, and everything else that we're doing is moving past your past and creating a brilliant future. Focusing on your present and creating a brilliant future. And my guest today, Kate Beeders, she actually not only specializes in helping people move past their past and creating their vibrant future, but she was also an accidental entrepreneur. So we're going to hear about that today, what that means, and how she was able to build a successful business in a downtrodden economy. So Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy. And yes, it was a downtrodden. And now we can kind of laugh about it, but it was definitely not laughable when it was going on. It was actually pretty frightening. This was, what was it, about 9-10 years ago? And just seeing my friends, whole floors of companies being laid off and all that kind of stuff. My company, what happened is first it merged, and then later on it was acquired. And because of that, there was a lot of duplication and all that. Yep. So I had been in this industry for about a little over 16 years. And at one point I was like, I love this industry and they're going to have to drag me out kicking and screaming. Because, it was great. The money at that time, money was before the economy tanked. The money was flowing, Tracy. Seriously, you could not answer the phone fast enough. And honestly, you couldn't spend the money fast enough, which I know now they're doing a lot of movies and stuff about it, but it was pretty crazy for a while. And, so what happened is I interviewed, with other companies who wanted me to do something similar. And how you just kind of feel deep in your gut. And it was something I never really had paid much attention to before, but just kind of saying wait a minute, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I had read this book about when change happens and things like that. And you get this opportunity to either say, okay, I'm just going to rebuild and go right back to where it was and find, that old, give it, give your best shot and all that. And, you can either say I'm going to just go and continue to build and, find another job just like what I had, or else you can sit there and say, I want to create something new. And I read the book, and it's the only book I've ever read where I sat with a box of Kleenex and went through the whole box, Tracy, which is not typically me, but it was just such a touching book. And I just decided I don't want to do this anymore. I loved it. And it wasn't I didn't love it, but it was just time for me to do the next thing. And so I kind of accidentally fell into being an entrepreneur. It just, I started learning about some really cool mindset techniques, and I started getting clients. Oh, and in between, I'd actually gotten into grad school. At first, I was I'm going to be a therapist because I love helping people. I took one course, got A's, and then I was wait a minute, I don't want to be having, and this is nothing, so everyone listening, this is nothing against therapy. Therapy is wonderful. It's just I did not want to be the deliverer of seeing somebody for the next 30 years, every Friday at 10 a.m. That's just not who I am.
Exactly. But
again, I'm not, just so everyone knows, therapy is wonderful, so I'm not knocking. It's just I did not want to be the deliverer.
Right, it wasn't for you.
It wasn't my model, exactly. Right. So I'm much more results oriented and let's move faster and all that. So I've been learning about this really cool mindset technique, started getting clients quite accidentally. And then people started going how are you getting clients? And people I trained with and all that. And I'm oh, well, it's easy. You just do this, because it all came naturally to me, partly from my background in business development and then partly just kind of who I was. Mm-hmm. So then I started teaching, and then one thing turned into another. And then I ended up growing this amazing business that I love. It's 8 years now where I have the honor and privilege that I get to speak on main stages, or sometimes even keynote, all over North America, interviewed, all over, been on big telesummits with 500,000 people listening, clients all over the world. And then I hold my own live events and retreats. And I just love the fact that it's all about kind of creating what you want to create, whatever that looks like for you. And I love that it's never done. It's always what do I feel like doing now? And, and all that. So that's kind of how my business started, quite accidentally.
I love it. And I totally know that story, because that's how Daring Woman started. I started my virtual assistant company back in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And so I totally know where you're going through, or where you're going with the downtrodden economy. Thank God I was an entrepreneur at that time. And so it didn't affect me too bad.
Yeah.
Um, and after 10 years, I was like, I'm tired of doing this. I need something more. And like you, I ignored it, that nagging, for a long
Yep.
time, until finally was like, all right, I am not living my purpose, my fulfilled life. What am I supposed to do? And that's how Daring Woman was born. So I completely get it. I need to know, and I know everybody listening is like, okay, what is this book that we have to read with a box of tissues?
So that's actually Elizabeth Lesser's book. And when I used to have a radio show, I had a radio show my first year of business, and I had people like Jack Canfield and Marcy Shimoff, Neil Donald Walsh, and all the biggies on my show. And I took one of Elizabeth's courses, and her book is Broken Open.
Broken Open. All right.
So yeah, it's a really fabulous book about, when things happen, and like I said, I've never had a book that I sat there with a box of Kleenex and I told her that, but I just love the book. But one thing interesting about being an accidental entrepreneur, Tracy, and I don't know if you felt this, but I've had a lot of my clients tell me this now, as they're starting businesses, going through it, and I just so get it, is that your whole circle of who you think is your circle looks at you like you're insane. My family thought I was like crazy. The man I was dating thought I was crazy. I mean, because it's like, wait a minute, you're giving up like the fancy title and the fancy company, that you work for, and all the benefits and blah, 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 because.
Yeah, you're not guaranteed a paycheck.
Exactly. And what I've learned though, is I've had clients who've been with big companies. One of my clients was with AT&T for 25 years and she got laid off. So, I learned since then is that there are no promises, even if you're with like a Fortune 100 company. I mean, you still are not guaranteed anything.
Yeah. There's no guarantees in life at all, regardless of what you're doing. I ran into the, you're crazy, it's not going to work. And, but I had small kids at home when I decided to leave my job as vice president of a finance company and start up this company in an industry that was brand new, that nobody'd ever really heard of. There was like nothing about virtual assistant on the internet. Now they're a dime a dozen. And and people were like, what does this mean? I said, what is the virtual assistant? I'm like, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's what I did. I figured it out and create something.
You, right?
Yeah. I did. I learned what I liked to do, what I wanted to do, what I definitely didn't want to do and wasn't good at. And, I like to think of it as that decade was giving me the education and the skills and the knowledge for me to be able to go out and create Daring Woman.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point, I am doing 99% of the work myself, building the websites and doing all of that stuff. And that's because I have that knowledge. So it's, I think that decade definitely prepared me. So
exactly. And everything always leads to the next thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, experience in corporate or experience doing something else previously, it all leads to helping you move forward.
Absolutely. Which is, that's kind of, I guess in a way talking about, this past re-imprinting that you talk about is, your past is leading you to your future. And, I know that a lot of us are like, oh, if I could go back in time, I would do this different. I would do that different. But I think when we do that, when we, if we were to go back and change things, then, we wouldn't be the person that we are today.
Yeah, yes and no. So can I elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely, please.
Okay, so what happens is, and I know we only have a limited amount of time, but this is what I teach at my live events and all this kind of stuff, because there's so much to it, Tracy, and it just like fascinates me, and it fascinates everyone who's listening and all that, because it's such a cool thing, is that we all have, fears and doubts and old stories, and we see the world through like our glasses. And so how I see the world is different how you see the world versus, you see you've got kids, how they see the world versus my family. We all see it a bit differently. And the way we see it is based on, our fears, our doubts, our belief of who we are and how we fit into the outside world. So what happens is, logically, we might know stuff. Like logically, you might know like, hey, I do a really great job. I'm worth this amount of money, or I'm worth being hired, or I'm worth having this opportunity, or whatever the heck it is. And logically, you're more than capable of it. And logically, you more than deserve it. Or it could be, losing weight, or it could be dating someone, whatever the heck it might be, right? But what happens is, on a subconscious level, which is 1 million times more powerful than that whole logical saying like, hey, wait a minute, you've got 10 master's degrees and you can more than well handle it. That on the subconscious level, that's where all the fears and doubts and old stories hang out. So just to give you an example, I helped one woman, and she was, I don't know, in her 30s. And when she was in high school, she became a cheerleader. And at most schools, you become a cheerleader, they give you the jacket that has like the megaphone, at least that's how they looked at my school, like megaphone on the back, and it's like cool color. So you'd walk around, even if it was like a heavy jacket because of football being played in colder weather, it didn't matter. You wore it if it was like 80 degrees. Like, I mean, that's how they wore around. Everyone knew they were cheerleaders, like the status thing.
Yep.
Well, her story was her family, even though she made the squad, her family couldn't afford the jacket, whatever it cost at that time. Mm-hmm. So she started feeling, first of all, like she wasn't part of the squad. She started feeling different than the rest of the squad. And because she couldn't afford this thing that everybody else had, it made her feel less than. So even though she had this accomplishment that she could, do whatever it was required to be in the squad, she felt less than because she didn't have the jacket. Right. So here she is, whatever it is, 15, 20 years later. And she still feels that she is not worthy of having more in her life, because she feels like she's been disappointed that good things won't happen for her and that she doesn't deserve them. Just from that one story. And then so every time something would happen to her going forward, she would still hold on to this belief, well, it didn't happen because I don't deserve it, or I'm not worthy of it, or someone else should have it instead of me. So when I went back and did the re-imprinting, what we did for her is we changed the story. And re-imprinting can happen in so many different ways, like so many different types of stories. But her story is that she got the jacket. And if you had seen her face, oh my gosh, Tracy, it was like someone had just told her, here's $10 zillion, right? She had this smile, and you're loved by a million men, and you're like, you can do no wrong. Her smile was like from ear to ear, as that expression goes. She was like so lit up, you couldn't even touch her. And all of a sudden she just changed her whole belief of who she was. And as a result, she was able to do things like, she ended up leaving, I believe she left her job and got a better job. She moved to a different place. The guy she'd been dating, she kind of nicely broke up with him and found a better guy. So before she'd been settling, because that was kind of her belief that she doesn't deserve more. So by going back and changing that story, everything, how she started showing up in her life totally changed. So just to kind of have everyone understand a little bit, because when I was in corporate, like if you had told me this stuff, my head would have started spinning around. I'd be like, what the heck are they talking about?
Right.
But I guess because I've seen it happen so often. So just kind of in just some basic, understanding of how the mind works is that you got your conscious and your subconscious.
Yep.
So if you've ever been to, like Disney has it, and some of the other big theme parks, you go there and you're sitting on a chair, and maybe it's like almost as if you're riding a roller coaster. Have you ever experienced that, Tracy?
Yes.
So you see it on the screen and you feel it. I mean, you literally feel like when it drops down, you really feel that drop, like your stomach feels like you're going to be sick.
Yep. I love that feeling.
Okay, you love it. I hate it. So anyway, whenever I experience that, whenever I go on one of those rides, I look down and I say, oh my gosh, the seats are actually nailed to the ground. They're nailed. I mean, technically I'm not going anywhere, but yet I believe I am on this roller coaster.
Right.
So the subconscious mind doesn't understand reality versus non-reality, what's imaginary. So what I'm really doing is kind of going back and changing the story for that person, because the subconscious mind doesn't know what's real and what's false. So when you start believing that really happened, you start showing up differently. Your confidence grows. You're more likely to ask for things. You're more likely to not settle for things. You're more likely to have a bigger vision of what you want for your life. So it's just really interesting how by making those shifts, everything can change for you as a result.
That's really fascinating, actually.
Isn't it fascinating?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I totally believe in writing your own story and all of that. But to rewrite your past in a way that your subconscious can pick up and change how you feel about things, that's really interesting to me. So I'm definitely going to want to do some more research into that. But
and you think about it too, is that you have this underlying voice. Like, so if you were that woman, you have and we all have stories like this. It might not be the cheerleading story, but maybe you didn't get selected for play, or maybe you were the last one picked, in gym when they go back and forth,
right.
captains, whatever your story is. I mean, pretty much all of us have some kind of story like that. So what happens is, you've got this voice. When I say you, I'm talking about the collective you. Has a voice playing over and over and over again in your head, telling yourself that you're not good enough. So when you keep hearing it over and over and over again, ultimately you start believing you're not good enough. So Tracy, think about it. If you don't believe you're good enough, are you going to ever ask for more money from your clients?
No, of course
right?
not.
Are you going to ever try to partner up with somebody? Because no, the same thing, no, because you're going to believe they're going to say no. If you're dating someone and the person's kind of a jerk to you, are you going to break up with them thinking you deserve better?
No, you're going to stay with them because you think that's what you deserve.
Exactly. Like that's the best it's going to be.
Right.
So when you're able to change that story, and there's a lot of different ways you can change somebody's belief of who they are. That's the re-imprinting is one way of doing it. It's just such a powerful, fast way of doing it. That why not, right? You're not changing the person's character. You're really just changing the person's belief. And I believe we're all here to be, do, and have more. And we shouldn't let these stories happen to us. But, when these things happen to us, typically we don't have somebody to guide us through it. We don't really understand it. And we take it all like it means that we're less than, that we're not enough.
Right. Wow. Now, how does that relate to the next step of it, which is to create your future?
So there's two different ways. There's a lot of different ways, but the two I just want to talk about for this interview is that one is future re-imprinting, and the other I also teach is deliberately creating your future. So future re-imprinting is a similar type of process, but just to give you an example, it's more about something that's happening in the future and to start believing that it's going to happen for you. So for example, one fellow, I just love this story because it's such a great story. He already had a very successful business, but he was doing his first multi-day event. And, I know I host events, anyone who hosts events knows there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of money.
Yes.
Yeah. And, a lot. Yeah. And you want to monetize it. A lot of money's being spent.
Yeah.
And you're usually doing it to grow your business, that you want people to say like, wow, I really liked what I learned. I want to keep learning more from this person. That's kind of the ultimate thing. So he lived in a big city. So, his costs were super, super high, as they are in any big city, between the event planner and the hotel and the food and you name it, all that kind of stuff, super expensive. And then, all of a sudden he had this big, huge pit in his stomach, like, shoot, like I'm spending all this money, Kate, but like what if nothing happens? What if at the end of 3 days people go like, thanks. And they just walk out, And so I helped him really get in touch with what he wanted his end results to look like. And he had this really, really clear picture of kind of the money he wanted to make from the event, and also where he saw himself celebrating, like eating and I no longer eat beef, but I understand what he was saying, eating a big, huge, delicious steak with a glass of wine, that was his idea of like, whew, look, it's done, and look, I'm celebrating now.
Right.
And so I helped him, through the re-imprinting, get really, really clear on this, and then clearing up any blocks that popped up. Things like, it's my first time doing it. What if people don't like it? What if this? What if that? And just through the mindset techniques that I'm an expert in, helping him clear out anything that kind of popped up. And he went into that thing with so much confidence. And sure enough, he ended up doing multi-six figures for his first event, and he's done multi-six figures since.
Nice.
Yeah. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. And then I'll ask my question.
Yeah. So the other thing too, I was going to say is the other piece is about deliberately creating, and that's kind of what he was doing. But I did a certain process with him, and so what I teach my clients is to really deliberately create your future, which means setting the intentions of what is it that you want, because we all know the days, the hours, the weeks, the months, the years fly by so fast. And it's so easy to get caught up with FOMO, fear of missing out, or bright, shiny object, or something that, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you're kind of, you're like, how come all these things I wanted aren't happening? So it's having them really get in touch with what they want, creating, setting that intention, pushing away all the shoulds, like, well, I should do this, or I should do that, or, because everyone else is doing it, or, or what your friends are telling you, and all that kind of stuff. And, getting into action, and also, also too, clearing out any, blocks that are holding them back from the belief that they can accomplish this. And it's very cool. One of my clients, she had set this intention, even though she's, an entrepreneur, besides her having a very successful business, she wanted accolades. That was something really important to her. And she never thought, when she first started talking about it, it really surprised her that she was even saying them, because she was almost like afraid or embarrassed to say, like, I want accolades, like I want it. But now she's getting them. And she and her family are moving into a new house in like another month and a half. And when she was describing the house, I said, that's the exact house that you've been setting the intention for these last couple of years. And she's like, oh my gosh, it is, and so, like, because everything she'd been doing had been leading up to that. And that's the whole thing, because, you're going to be working hard no matter what. Go after what you really want, and be very deliberate about it. So that's kind of what I wanted to share, Tracy.
Oh, that's awesome. And that kind of answers my question, which was going to be, we've talked a lot about how to do this as an entrepreneur, but a lot of our listeners aren't entrepreneurs, and so how can, and a lot of them are thrivers of trauma. And so, how can they use these techniques to move past their past, those past traumas, and to be able to create that future,
Yeah, so there's different techniques, and it depends on the trauma. I've had clients with all different types of traumas, and it really depends. And honestly, one thing I like to share is, yes, I'm no for getting fast results, but the thing is that with certain traumas, you actually have to move a bit slowly, because there's depending on the type of trauma, it has to do with stress level. But all different things, so miscarriages, sexual trauma, all sorts of stuff. And you have to just be really, really careful with who you're working, who's helping you with that, to make sure they get the sensitivity. And ultimately what happens is, when you are re-imprinting these things, it isn't like you're making this thing go away. So the example I gave about the cheerleader is a very happy story, right? She got her jacket, and now she's one of the gang, and all's good, and she feels like she belongs and she can take on the world. Well, sometimes it's not so much that feeling, but sometimes what can happen is, with the other types of traumas, there can be a lot of blame and shame and guilt and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And the point is not that we're making the issue just vanish, but just to help not have that blame and shame and guilt hold you back from living this amazing life from something that happened, potentially maybe when you were a child or teenager or, older, because that's not fair to you. No matter how bad, and excuse me, Tracy, I'm not a big swearer, no matter how much it sucks, it's, you at some point you want to be able to move on. And if someone did something to you, it isn't like you're telling that person that it was okay by you doing this work, but it's more just allowing yourself to move on. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Okay. That's good advice there. Wow, this has been incredible. I am just fascinated, and I could talk to you for a lot longer because I want to know more.
Well, come to Boston. Come to one of my events.
Oh yeah. There you go. Road trip. All right. Well,
exactly.
Thank you, Kate, so much for coming on and sharing with us these techniques and lessons. I think it's going to be incredibly valuable for a lot of women who are listening. I know it's definitely been an eye-opening for me. So, and I'm going to go check out that book. I can't wait to go read that book, and I'll make sure I have tissues in hand.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much. And I'm excited. And yeah, I'm excited to share this information because I do know that people can make all sorts of changes if they want, if they're willing to step into it.
And that's it right there. That's the key, that they have to want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key right there. That's awesome. Ladies, as always, thank you so much for listening. I don't say it enough how grateful I am for you tuning into the Daring Woman podcast and visiting us on daringwomaninc.com and in our Facebook group and all of that. So I love you all dearly. I appreciate you all, and we will talk to you next week.